Yeah, just star picket. Cool. Hey, Tim.
So, Mr. Alex Rains, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day today to join me here yet again. What's been going on today?
Today's been rather lax. Bit of housework. Just went up to the shed and set something up for the lathe to turn later on today. But I've just been sleeping in and had a late breakfast and just watching the dogs play behind me and chilling a bit. The wife and daughter out at the folk festival, so I've got some time for myself.
And what is that festival?
It's the Townsville Folk and Acoustic Music Club's annual festival. It's been running for 25 years or more, different venues, but started up in, I think, Paluma, which is one of the rainforest areas just north of Townsville. There was the Rainforest Festival, and then it moved locations a few places, but it's been sort of organised by the Townsville Folk and Acoustic Music Club for 20 odd years. So they have a 4-day music festival with all sorts of different acts from around the world, a lot from different parts of Australia. That's a folk music festival. However, there's a lot of sort of mainstream-ish music coming into it too. So it's not all Morris dances and Irish jigs type thing. Yeah.
Well, what's the lodging situation out there? Are they staying in tents? Are there cabins? What's the deal?
Oh, it's a they hire a space from a cattle property, so it's just a big paddock, and so people take their tents or their camper trailers. Jamie's got a swag, so she just rolls out her swag. Bethany's got a tent. There's no permanent buildings out there. I think it's all just come set up the camp. They bring out sound stages, big portable toilet blocks and shower blocks for the people. We get hundreds of people camp out there, and then a couple of days they pack it all down and it turns back into cattle property.
Do you normally attend, or is it not your thing?
I haven't gone for a few years. We actually went there on our we timed our honeymoon to coincide with the festival one year when we got married, so 20 odd years ago, and went every year for I think 13, 15 years, but the last few years have just been, I've been over it. We used to volunteer and run the bar or run the help run the shop, help run the gate, all sorts of different things, and we're fairly into the club, active in the committee and stuff. But just sort of burnt out a bit, so I've just had a few years break from it. But Jamie hasn't missed a festival since she started going to it when it moved to just down the road from us.
Well, how's work been since we last spoke?
Work is steady. Coming into winter now, so we've dried off. The rain has essentially disappeared for the last 6 weeks, 2 months. We've hardly had a drop, which means anything that's not irrigated just dries out and doesn't really grow. So, the lawns and stuff still stay green, but because it gets a bit cooler of a night time here, the grass doesn't grow as well. and the shorter sunlight hours. We're down to it's dark by 6 o'clock, and so we're sort of 12 hours of sunlight rather than a bit longer during the summer. Because we're only we're 19 degrees latitude south, so we don't have the wild swings of like like you get up in Alaska and whatnot, where you've got sun all day or days without sun. We sort of just vary by a couple of hours, but the grass really likes the sun. So when you have bit lower than normal and it's cooler, and the things don't grow as well, but I've got plenty of woody weeds to chop out and other things to do for people. So work hasn't slowed. It's just changed what I'm doing on each property.
I keep bringing you up as my number one podcast fan in Australia. We didn't really talk about it last time because both shows were still relatively young. What do you think about these programs?
I quite enjoy them. I think they're really good. They're well made. Obviously the river, the Between the Levees riverboat podcast is booming with the 60 odd interviews, and everybody who's on that seems to be really excited about sharing their experiences in that industry, which is as someone who's not in the industry, it makes it seem like it's a nice, be a interesting industry to be in. Seems quite attractive, actually. I'm thinking of packing up and coming over and being a deckhand for a couple of years. But no, I'm really enjoying them. And yeah, while I'm out on the mower or the chainsaw, I listen to the podcasts, and it keeps me entertained. It's something different from true crime and other things. So it settles my mind a bit better.
Good to hear. Great. What's been one of the most surprising things you've learned?
From Between the Levees, it's very noticeable. There's sort of a generational change when you talk to people about what their onboarding was, and up to a certain point, their onboarding experience is pretty much get on the boat and do what the other bloke tells you to do. To a lot more of the safety and not indoctrination, the induction type stuff, which it seems to be when I was working, when I was at ag college in the early 90s, we were sort of changing from just following along and doing things to getting heavily doing the inductions and getting tickets before you set on, before you got on a tractor or all sorts of things. So it's just interesting to notice that there was the same sort of change in the way workplaces and industries jumped into the safety things, at a sort of similar time, but there's a very definite change.
Well, you said you had a few more stories to share. Frame the first one up for me. When was it? What were you up to?
Well, see, I've been in my local rural fire brigade, which was called Bush Fire Brigades when they first started, for about 30 yees. I was an officer for about 25 of them. So we had a lot of, I've got a lot of stories from bushfires. Where we are here is we're really a grassy area. We do have trees and forests, but most of our forests aren't super thick. So when fires go through the mountains, they burn the grass that's below the trees rather than like when the forests burn, like in your California and your northern fires and our southern fires, the whole trees and everything sort of explode into flame and burn, whereas where we are, the grass underneath them burns. So it's a bit different. But I've got 25, 30 years of stories from them. A lot of them are very boring. There's some that stick in the head. One was one of the scariest moments I had. Was Christmas Eve, and it's got to be 15 years ago now. So whatever that is, early 2000s, and it was a really hot day, really dry day. The humidity was down below 20%, and a brigade in a neighbouring area was doing a control burn on a block of land, and the brigade in that area liked to knock off early in the afternoon, so they would do all their control burning for people in the mornings. Unfortunately, as the day heats up and the humidity drops down, fires become a bit harder to control. And that day in particular, with strong winds and low humidity, the fire got out of control and burnt from their patch all the way through into the town, into the closest suburb of Stewart, which probably 8 to 10 kilometres. A lot of it was burning against the Defence Force land, so there was no structures, not very much in danger except for along the highway where there's some houses, and I was tasked to go and protect a house, and we didn't get up-to-date information regarding how the weather was changing. The winds were picking up and the humidity had dropped right down, and so we went up to one of the only houses that were along the path of the fire and did essentially what we do at all the time, which is you've got a break, and we just grab our drip torches, light up the grass on the far side of the break, and we start fires that burn into the oncoming fire to reduce the fuel ahead of the fire, and means that when the fire front hits, it is further away from the structure or the road, whatever we're trying to protect. But that day, the weather conditions weren't ideal for that tactic. Yeah, they weren't ideal for that tactic, but we didn't get the updated weather information saying it's now humidity's too low to do that. So we did it, and the fire just came across so fast, faster than I've ever seen a fire travel. It was on the top of a ridge, and the wind was roaring, and I had my crew had the truck backed into the house, into the carport, and I had gone down the driveway, which is a couple of 100 metres, lighting up along the other side of the driveway to create a fire break to burn into the fire. I got down to the bottom of the driveway and looked back and just saw the fire racing across the top of the hill. Ignored, sort of took up the fire that I'd lit and just carried it across the break, across the house. I just lost everything in just a big pall of smoke and flames. And I was sitting there thinking, I've just killed my crew. And then once the wind carried the smoke clear, I saw that it actually had burnt around the house, and we'd gotten there just in time. My other officer who was in the truck, he's a big lad. He trying to figure it. He's probably close to 300 pounds. He was a big lad. Just kicked the security door off its hinges, dragged hoses from the truck, and hung over the verandas and put out all the fire as it was sort of going in underneath the house and saved the house. That was one of the ones that stick in my head for for excitement, especially, with the sort of the danger of everybody else. I mean, it was what we did all the time, but the weather report had come in half an hour to an hour earlier, and that hadn't been relayed from the fire com office out to the fire ground. So we were doing things where the weather didn't make them. They weren't tactics that we should have been using, but that's all we had to do. So it was all we knew to do. So anyway, we saved the house and no one died, which was a good thing. But for a few minutes there, when everything disappeared into smoke and flame, I was a bit worried. And the heat from the fire had caught up with me. I'd actually dropped my drip torch about halfway down the driveway and sprinted probably 50 metres out to a clear bit before I was able to turn around and see what was happening.
How big are your crews for these fires?
Well, we're all volunteers, so it's a matter of who's available. I've turned out to fires by myself, just me and the truck, and we've turned out with 2 people. 3 is sort of ideal, because you can have one person driving, one person on the hose or on the drip torch, and the other person being able to sort of coordinate via radios with other crews. But there's been plenty of times where you just one truck, 2 people in it, and you do what you can. It's just your tactics and your strategy changes to based on the resources you've got. If you had 4 trucks, you can do a lot more. But depending on the terrain, you could do a lot more in some places. But if you've just got 2 blokes in a truck with a drip torch and a hose, then you can do something. But it just might mean that you sacrifice another 5 or 10 acres of land to the fire, and have a backburn further ahead of the fire front, because it will take too long to do it. We also did road accident rescue type things, and we've done helicopter rescues up in the local national park, because we're a satellite suburb, so we're best part of half an hour away from the city. So that's where most of the emergency services are based. So when there was an incident of any sort of accident out in our area, we would get responded early. And being locals and knowing the terrain, we were sort of the guides for the urban rescues when they came out. We'd locate the injured people, and guide the professional firefighters to the area so they could coordinate with the helicopters to get them in and out. Done quite a few carrying of people out of in odd terrain on stretchers. Seen a few dead bodies. Seen a drowned person. Young girl got caught in a hole in a waterfall a few years back, and we'd had a cloudburst. We had about 4 inches of rain in less than an hour, and it was right up in the top of the mountain, which is the catchment for the river. And she got her leg caught in a rock, or in between a couple of rocks, and couldn't get out, and the river came up and drowned her. We spent quite a few hours up there trying to lasso her and trying to get her out of the river, which didn't happen. And they had to go up for the body recovery the next day, and when the river had dropped considerably. But that was that one took a bit out of me. I was the first of our crew on the site. I had to swim across the flooded creek above where she was caught to try and get some ropes and things to where she was. And we were given the wrong information by the caretaker at the camping ground, and he sent us up the wrong track, which sent us wrong, the high side of the river. And so I had to scramble down 30 meters of rough, sort of almost cliff face full of prickly weeds to swim the swollen creek to then get back to where they were. And there'd been a group of people, probably 8 or 10 people, who were with her, who were holding her out of the water so that she didn't drown. And when we got to the wrong side of the river and we saw them, they were still all in the water. By the time I'd gotten across to the river and then across to the right side, the creek had come up higher and had washed one of their legs out from underneath him. And when he slipped, he hit the next fella, and the whole crowd of them got knocked out and washed further down the river. And by the time they regathered their footings and got back to the creek and were able to get back to where she was, she'd been underwater for 5 minutes and the river was a lot higher, and so she ended up drowning. And I'd got to there just as they got back up to where she was. So that was a bit of an issue, that one. I didn't sleep for about a week afterwards. In fact, the very next weekend, a young soldier was fresh in Townsville, just got posted to Laverack Barracks and had come out and had gone up to the same swimming hole, and on the way back had got himself caught in the same group of rocks that the girl had gotten caught in the week before. And we got sent up, and because we had spent the week chewing over how we would have saved her if we got there on time, was able to put that plan into action early for the squatty, and we able to pull his leg out of the rock with about 3 or 4 of us on a group of ropes, and we got him out. Got him out before the river took him, which was good. And I stopped having nightmares after that one, which was, I think, that needed to work out in my head that we could have saved that girl. So if we got there earlier.
Backtracking a little bit to the brush fire you talked about.
Yep.
That kind of got out of hand. Bushfire.
Yeah.
What is a drip torch? What is a fire break? And do you and your team have oxygen tanks for these fires? I mean, what do you go out there with?
Right. So a drip torch is a 5-litre canister with a hollow wand and a wick of like a heavy metal, like a baffle, that when you put a mixture of diesel and petrol or gasoline in the canister, when you turn it upside down, the fluid travels down the wand, dribbles into the wick, and then you light that. And so you're dribbling a liquid that's on fire. And so that's a fire bug. And you just walk along or jog along, or if you've got a quad bike or if the road's good enough, you can do it with hanging off the side of the vehicle, and you just essentially just leave a trail of fire behind you. And generally you're lighting off a fire break, which is any clear patch of earth. we've used cattle pads, like the about an 8-inch wide clear path of earth that the cattle all traverse on the same thing, and you get a nice clean dusty dirt only road that's 6 or 8 inches wide in the middle of a paddock that travels for kilometres, and depending on the wind you can light off the edge of that, but a lot of times a graded break, a grader will come through ahead and clear 4 or 5 foot wide strip of earth. Just push the rocks and grass out of the road, and you can burn off that.
What is the purpose of that? Is this to divert fire from advancing certain areas, or to stop it altogether? How does that work?
It's the method we use is called dry firefighting. We've got a huge area to look after, and most of the fires are far away from any water points. This is a very rural area. There might be 6,000-8,000 acres and you've got to get into parts of it with on a track. So you can't carry water. You can't carry a huge amount of water. The fire trucks will carry somewhere between 700 and 1,400 litres of water. So a lot of our firefighting is dry firefighting, which we burn off these breaks, get ahead of the fire, and you remove the fuel from ahead of the fire. So you define the break and say, this is as far as the fire is going, and you burn from that, and it's burning against the wind most of the time, and that burns back. And so when the main fire hits the back burn, which is the fire we like to call the back burn, because it burning back towards the other fire, then all the fuel between there and the fire break's been removed by the other fire, and the fire goes out. So that's the plan anyway. Grass fire is a lot easier to do than the forest fires, because when they get up into the trees, the wind will carry leaves and stuff for hundreds and hundreds of metres. We've got a couple of areas that are really scrubby where we can cut a break, burn back from the break, and then you watch the wind carry burning embers over the break, and a fire starts 200 metres further down, and you spend a lot of time chasing spot fires. But if it's a really grassy area, then that will generally stop the fire. You just burn out all the fuel ahead of it. And in regards to PPE, we have steel cap boots, and depending on your preference, we have overalls, slightly thicker than sort of mechanics overalls, not greatly thicker, and they're treated with a chemical that is fire resistant, fire retardant. We've got 2-piece suits that are a bit heavier material than that. They're just fire retardant material. And we carry smoke masks, just the little sort of material mask that you like, heavy dust masks. And they do issue fiberglass helmets. However, most of us who've been there for a long time just wear our Kubras, the what do you call them, Stetsons, the felt hats. They're really good for insulating, and we're out in the sun while we're doing it, and so a bit of shade as well is a good thing. No, we don't carry oxygen masks and stuff. The urban fire crews, the paid firemen do. They'll carry their BA, their breathing apparatus, but they generally only use that in structure fires or in vehicle fires if they've got to get really close and put their foam and stuff all over the vehicle, and they're in the toxic smoke. But yeah, all of us volunteers don't have BA. They're starting to get some better or heavier duty smoke masks in the last year or so, but most of us just use the paper filter ones, and they work.
Random question, unaffiliated with anything we've discussed so far. This is the outback an Americanism, or is that the entirety of Australia, a certain region of Australia? Do you all refer to any part of the country as the outback, or is it the whole thing?
Oh no, yeah, we refer to the outback as well. I'm on the east coast, so the outback is to the west of us, whereas Western Australians would say the outback's to the east. But most of the centre of Australia, apart from within a couple hundred kilometres of the coast, is pretty barren, desolate. Desert. So the outback is out anything a couple hundred kilometres sort of west of us is sort of getting into the outback. But I suppose as you get towards the central desert and Alice Springs and Uluru and that sort of stuff, that's it's a bit nebulous and amorphous. The outback is an idea, and where you could, if you see a picture, you say, that's the outback. But getting to pinpoint exactly where it is on a map, it's generally all the bits in the middle is the outback.
And was Steve Irwin the national treasure we sort of see him as from this end?
I think Steve Irwin was a great bloke. A lot of people do. Yeah, he's an icon. Some people, there's a bit of a cultural cringe where, some people think Australians should be more than just crikey and running around in khaki and chasing crocodiles. But for those of us who live in the non-city areas, that's a, I won't say a usual event, but it was something we related to. And his love of the animals and the bush really it struck home with most of us. So I'd say apart from the people who think they're trying to think that they're better than they are, Steve Irwin was pretty much a national treasure.
And how far is his sanctuary, or is the Australia Zoo that he was running?
Yep, Australia Zoo. That's down, way down the coast from me. Probably it'd be 12 hours drive from my place to there. It's down on the Sunshine Coast somewhere.
Is it southwest of you, or straight south down the coast?
South down the coast. Yeah, it's probably it's southeast. We've got it starts to bulge a bit down towards that way, bulges out to the east. So yeah.
Well, do you have any other stories that come to mind to share about a life out there?
Well, there's a lot of stories that. So I'm just playing with trying to get my phone cord to not drain on my leg. A lot of stories from our area, our little township here, our little suburb. When it was developing initially, we had. I don't know how. I'll tell them to you. You can always edit them out if you think they're a bit gross. We had a local dump, which essentially was a pit in a quarry that the Shire rented off a local landholder. He had a quarry business, and so the town dump was, you took it across the highway, turned off the track, and then jumped the railway line and went off into the bush. And you would just, throw your rubbish in the pit and come home. And it wasn't uncommon to then have a bit of a poke around and see if there were things that could be reused. One man's trash is another's treasure, as they say. And a lot back in the mid 70s and early 80s, there was a lot of movement out here. People building houses and coming into the area. So one of our neighbours, well, lived within 5 kilometres, so she's a neighbour, was quite like doing decorating stuff. And one week when they took their rubbish down to the local tip, she found a whole heap of paint tins sitting to one side. She picked them up and sort of shook them, and oh yes, there was obviously some liquid in there. And so all these, great. I'll take these paint tins home and decorate part of the house. We've painted different colours and all sorts of things. And so she takes them home and prepares her bits for painting, and then she cracks the lids on the paint tins, only to find that obviously some of the people around hadn't dug their toilets yet, and they were using the paint tins as their night soil chamber pots. And so she very quickly put the lid back on and drove straight back down to the dump and threw all the paint tins back away.
It's quite a find.
That was quite a find, yes, and that's one of the a sort of the local legend that got passed around between many of us. There was one of our neighbours was a great larrikin. He would, when he was sober, he would sit on his front veranda and look across the street to his neighbour. His neighbour would be out in the garden, and he'd sit there and just ring on the telephone, and she would hear the phone ring and race all the way back to the house. This is 5 acres of land, so she might have to run 100 metres back to the house, and just as she'd get to the house, he would hang up and wait for her to come back to the halfway out to the garden, and then ring again and wait for her to get back to the house and then hang up. And he spent afternoons doing this until she found out. But yeah, that was just simple mischief that people got up to. A lot of places before, if they didn't have a bore, people would pump out of the creek for their water supply. But we only got town water out here in the mid 2000s, 2005, 2008. So between the late 70s and then, you either had a bore or you pumped out of the creek. And there were quite a few instances of people pulling their pumps out of the creek to the very last minute before the floods came through. And there was some interesting moments, people building rafts as the floodwaters are rising up, trying to save their pumps from the river. And a lot of last minute rescues of people throwing ropes and chains everywhere to secure either their bores or to rescue people who left it 5 minutes too late to pull their pump out and had to get pulled out from the creek. I'm trying to think now. I can tell you about some of the dead bodies. We've had I don't know what sort of stories you like.
Well, look,
there was a bloke.
Go ahead.
No, there was a bloke around the corner a couple of years ago who was felling a big tree, and he'd taken everything into consideration, I think, apart from the wind, where the tree was going to fall. And when the tree started to fall, his chainsaw got jammed and he ran off, and the wind picked up and it swung the tree around and it crushed him. We were called out as the brigade to help, and ended up getting my chainsaw out of the truck and cutting bits and pieces of tree out of the road to retrieve his body. Had a few car accidents where we've had to find body parts or help look for body parts because motorcycles hit a truck or something and just turned into red mist. Some are a bit gross. Some maybe you don't want all those stories on your podcasts.
Well, look back, 30 years or so, or even longer than that. Did you ever find yourself lying to tourists like your wife said all of you people do?
Oh, all the time. It is um, there was a quote in a book somewhere that said, God only made Americans for Australians to take the piss out of. And we live up to that as much as we can. Tourists are easy to, so ready to believe anything you say, especially if you say it, in a fair dinkum way, and you crank your accent up a bit so they understand that you're fair dinkum. And yeah, obviously the drop bears are the boogeyman of the Australian bush. The carnivorous koalas, the drop bears that'll jump out of the trees and drop onto your head and bite you and disembowel you from that. Well, I think a lot of the Australians yarns that we scare tourists with are all based on fact. They're just given a little bit of tweak. I mean, we don't lie. Australians never lie, but we do tell yarns. And I think the difference is that lying is something you do to get an advantage over somebody, whereas spinning a yarn is something that's done purely for entertainment's sake. So, yeah, there's quite a few things exaggerated, but then there's times when, not like being in the boats and looking outside of the canoe and having a crocodile sort of saunter past or laying on the bank beside you. The meeting large snakes on the roads as we're, wandering down for night time, or those sort of things are very well, out in the rural areas they're quite common, but yeah, you can always add on an extra couple of meters for the tourists for the size of the snakes and things, but a lot of the time we don't have to. But yeah.
All right, I've heard it before on YouTube or Facebook, something somewhere. Remind me what exactly fair dinkum means.
Fair dinkum means true. I'm being honest. Absolutely, fair dinkum is true. Or true dinks is sort of the slang of the slang. Yeah. So dinkum is true. Fair dinkum is really true.
And then you turn around and spin a yarn with people?
Yeah. You spin
Well,
yarns.
we call that being full of shit. But anyway.
Well, yeah, that could be it too. But we do like to. You got to enjoy life, and yeah, you've got to have a laugh. Have a laugh.
I agree.
But yeah, I'm sure there'll be somebody in Florida whose grandfather used to juggle 12-foot alligators or something. I'm sure you've got something similar.
Do you have any good croc stories?
Well, Jamie would probably have the best ones because she used to feed them. She used to feed them at the Billabong. In fact, when she was doing it, there was only her and Steve Irwin's wife, the only two women in Australia who were feeding crocs. So, yeah, I mean, I've seen them in the rivers, been going fishing and seen little crocs on the bank, and there's a resident freshwater croc who's been in and out of the national park for the last few years, and we've seen him. Friends have caught baby ones where they hatch, the females come up and nested up a sort of a side creek in a someone's dam, and we've handled little baby ones and stuff. But I don't think I'd really want to come across the big salty down in the system, because well, I'd like to be able to tell the yarn, and I think if you come across the really big ones, you don't get the chance to tell the yarn. You've got to have someone else tell it. But we've had a few attacks lately, actually. Up north, up north is sort of north of Cairns, where you get into the Daintree River and up onto the Cape. It's least populated than anywhere else, and big wide tracts of land and lots of forest and scrub and stuff. And so the crocodiles up there tend to be a bit bigger and maybe a bit more because they're not you don't see them because there's less human interaction with them. So when there are attacks, they're generally sort of up that way, and people doing things that they shouldn't be doing, like fishing in the same spot for 2 or 3 days in a row. Is we're always told as kids you didn't do that. You know, if you went down to the river, if you're camping somewhere for a week, you collect your water at different spots each day. You know, you didn't fish in the same spot each day, because once you start doing it, if there's a croc there, they notice your routine. They'll just drop right where you normally are, and they yeah. So I haven't been taken by a croc. Otherwise, that would be a marvelous story. In fact, if I was taken by a croc, it probably wouldn't be a bad way to go, because it'd be a very Australian way to go. That'll be bitten by a snake. Yeah.
Well, speaking of snakes, have you had any interesting relocations to do lately?
Since we last spoke, there was just a little tree snake in a neighbour's garage that was freaking everybody out, but I just went down and picked it up, showed the kids down there that it wasn't dangerous, and the parents all sort of stand back, and the kids go, "Oh, can I play with it?" And you go, "Well, it's your snake, just put it back in the tree when you're done." But yeah, but as they say, as it's coming into winter, they cool down a bit, and so the snakes don't. Well, they're still around, but they're not as around as they are when it's really warm. So it's been a bit quiet, which is good.
And speaking of winter, it's June 10th right now. It's very much not winter here where I am. Well, you're actually you're June 11th already, are you not?
We're Sunday.
Yeah, so
Sunday the 11th.
Yes.
Yes.
And you also told me earlier, I think it's 26 degrees Celsius, which comes out to about 79 over here.
Yeah, it's around about that at the moment. Yeah, that's our
winter's just beginning for you.
Yeah, winter starts 1st of June. That's our seasons. 1st of June, winter. 1st of September, starts spring. 1st of December's summer. 1st of March is autumn. So we are into winter. However, we've only had, or maybe 6-8 days in the last month where it's been down below 12 degrees at night. We've had warm nights. The days are always in the mid-20s. It's pretty rare for us to get below 20 during the day. That's a noteworthy event, because we're still in the tropics, and we still get plenty of. The sun's quite hot, even though it's winter, but it's the night times that we relish the cool. But we've had rarely have so far this year. Rarely anything less than 12, and 12 degrees is an important thing in our house, because if it's going to be less than 12 degrees, we get to light the fireplace. So we have a little potbelly stove that's been plumbed into the house. It was put in when the house was built. Jamie's mother had the house built, and she was a frog. So there's a heater in both bathrooms, a big electric bar heaters in the bathrooms, and the fireplace, because she didn't like getting cold. And if it's going to be less than 12 degrees, we get to light the fire. And it's now 11th of June, and I haven't lit the fire in June yet. I think I lit it a couple of times at the end of May when it was a couple of cool nights, but then it's all heated up again. So that's global warming for you.
Well, do you have anything you would like to ask any of the guests that you have seen that I've had so far?
Oh, apart from asking for a ride down the river on one of the tugboats, actually Scuffy the Tugboat was one of my favourite little golden books when I was growing up. The Adventures of Scuffy the Tugboat. Um, but I wouldn't mind having a chat to Colin Bush about his woodworking and his sunken, retrieved timber that he's been working with. That sounds a bit interesting. Just noticed the other day there was a mob trying to get some retrieved timber from down in Tasmania, where the dams, they put the big hydro dams in, and so they'd flooded forests, and now somebody's trying to get a business going in cutting the timber that's been cutting down the trees that are under the water, which is quite interesting. So
Yeah, he's very proud of that stuff.
He it seemed to he sparked right up when he was talking about his little wood shop there.
Maybe we can line that up one of these days.
Maybe we can, yeah. But as you found out the other day, the price of air travel is it's a bit high at the moment. So unless I can hitch a lift on one of those Chinese spy balloons and float on over, just don't shoot me down until we hit the Mississippi, and I'll be fine.
We'll keep that in mind. We'll keep an eye out for you. Well, thanks a lot for your time again, sir.
No worries. I must say I used to read comics when I was a kid, mostly Phantom, but Archie comics as well. Archie happened to be what the local newsagent carried, and some of the quotes of it'll be a cold day in July. Before things, it's like it's always cold in July. What are you talking about? It took me, the idea that it's still, that the other side of the world's wrong way around, but the idea that it's hot and they're having barbecues and it's like, and they're doing all these things, and like, well, we're sitting here in flannelette shirts and Ugg boots going, it's 12 degrees and it's freezing. But yeah, it's quite interesting. It's nice having mates on the other side of the world to chat to, because you all live very different experiences. I appreciate having a chat to you.
Well, thank you again. We'll be in touch.
No worries, Timbo. Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, see you, dude.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.